My name is Dr. Rich Hilsden, and you are watching Knife Skills. Today, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's a lot of conversation about when and how to open up the economy. And it made me realize and think about an important principle that's guiding doctors and how we respond to this, and that is the precautionary principle. You see, the precautionary principle is this idea that first you do no harm, which is something that doctors understand intuitively. It's part of our training. It's part of the Hippocratic Oath. It's ingrained into the culture of medicine. And doctors are being looked to provide guidance to public policy as we manage the COVID-19 pandemic. And when doctors are asked to give their opinion, the guiding principle that's governing most of what doctors are recommending is this concept of the precautionary principle. Now, to break it down a bit further, the precautionary principle is this idea of first do no harm, but first do no harm from a bigger picture, from a society point of view. When you think about public health policies, environmental policies, situations where a free market might not be efficient and might not actually allow for optimal performances of society, the precautionary principle is something that comes in and helps policymakers, advisors make decisions regarding what they should actually do in those situations. So think about environmental hazards. First of all, you could dump a chemical into the ocean and the impact might be small. You could dump that same chemical in the ocean and the impact might be large. If you're not sure of what that impact would be, the precautionary principle would state, well, we don't want to pollute our oceans, so rather than allowing for you to dump that chemical into the water, you have to provide evidence and proof that placing that chemical in the water is not going to cause harm. So the burden of proof is applied to the person who wants to enact a certain action. Well, that's what's happening here in the COVID-19 environment, where doctors are saying, I know we've made it so far. It's April 29th. Most of the communities are handling the COVID-19 pandemic with minimal serious stresses to the healthcare system. Certainly in Ontario and in my community, London, Ontario, we are managing without too much stress to the healthcare system. And people are starting to wonder, should we open up the economy right now? And that's eliciting a pretty strong emotional response. So I want to bring a few things to your attention.
Governor Kemp, you should be ashamed of yourself. I'm at work today, and I just got the information that Kemp, I can't even call him Governor Kemp, is reopening Georgia on Friday and then opening everything up on Monday. I'm so upset that I'm not going to take my mask off. I mean, I don't even want you to see the cuss words that are coming, that could be coming out of my mouth. Do they not understand that we are coming to work under these conditions? This is what I'm wearing. I just had to reclaim this. This is my new, I'm doing all of this stuff, all this, to try to protect myself, to come in here and to take care of patients.
You can see that physician is frustrated, and there's many reasons. She feels that there aren't adequate PPE protections for her to provide care for her patients. She's concerned that there's going to be influx of people to her hospital that she's not going to be able to care of. She's concerned about herself being sick. And those are genuine and legitimate concerns. Without a question, I feel for her as well. But there are large groups of the population that feel strongly different. You can see that rallies and protests have come to essentially express a criticism of this precautionary principle point of view.
As our country's streets lay deserted and quiet in the midst of our global pandemic, the sounds of American protesters have gone largely silent. Until now.
Our new normal does not mean that we will sacrifice our freedoms for our safety.
This morning in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, hundreds of protesters defied the state stay-at-home order and lined the streets in front of the state capitol.
Get me liberty or get me death!
That line, give me freedom or give me death, is an important feeling that many people have when it comes to situations like COVID-19, the quarantine, and lockdowns. The reality is that a lot of people are members of Western society and participate in society because of the freedoms. We pride ourselves on freedoms, and yet the government has restricted that. The idea is that in the long run we'll be better off with the government restricting our freedoms. And yet there's something about the spirit of our Western democratic societies that really embraces this idea that I'm willing to take a risk, that I don't want the government deciding where and when I should go to places. I live in this society because I value those freedoms more than maybe even I value my life. And that's what's being communicated by the protesters. And of course, the media weighs in on both sides. There are videos of the beaches in Florida opening up, showing that under limited circumstances that the previous lockdown could be lifted. And yet there's a great deal of fear that there might be a reemergence of pandemic conditions when it comes to COVID-19. So the question that I'm posing people watching this is really who should be influential during this decision making? Who should we be listening to? Remember, doctors are always going to focus on the precautionary principle. We're always going to be focusing on do no harm. It's part of our core nature. And we're always going to offer the conservative estimates. Politicians, on the other hand, are not meant to look at the precautionary principle as their only guiding principle. The principles of the Charters of Rights and Freedoms, those principles that the U.S. outlined in the Declaration of Independence, those principles oftentimes fall outside of the precautionary principle. And when I think about this, I like to think about the issue of driving or motorcycle riding. If we were to limit harm in society, if that was society's main goal, is to limit harm, well, we would have stronger restrictions on automobile traffic. We have stronger restrictions on motorcycles. Maybe motorcycles would be completely eliminated because there is significant harms that happen in car crashes every day. And yet society has made a decision to say, that's a risk that we're willing to allow people to take. As we're getting to this stage in the pandemic, there's a push from a lot of community members to try to increase the risk that our society is willing to take when it comes to this virus. And doctors like myself are always going to come out and always going to say, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. If we're going to take this from a precautionary point of view, we need to wait. So I'm not here to make a judgment on what the government is deciding to do. I'm not here to push one way or the other. But it is really important to understand the agenda and the focus of medical providers when we're providing advice. That focus is the precautionary principle. Do no harm first. Limit risk first, even if that isn't in line with the values in general that the society we're part of holds. You've been watching Knife Skills. My name is Dr. Richard Hilsden. Thank you for tuning in.